moment. Got it. Recording. Hit got it. It's like, okay, we're recording. Setting up meeting for YouTube Live. Clunk, clunk, clunk. Done redirecting to YouTube. Okay, that's going to show up. Got it. And now we're going to have an echo. Got it. And let's close that window. Here we go. Okay. Then back to Zoom. And now we click local record. That live stream. Where's the local record? Oh, record. Here we go. 3, 2, 1, record on this computer. Okay, hello everybody, boys and girls. So glad you came back to play with us. I see Ralph Otterpole is with us too. Hi, Ralph. Ralph is coming to play with us in a couple of weeks, and we were just talking to Teresa about the alchemy show coming up. And last week's show, fractalu.com, between the live stream and the regular recording, we have about 7,000 views, guys. We could go global. We might be viral. We might even be important. It's so cool. Anywho, so the announcements from last week, we officially launched the Planck Tuner new invention from Tufan, who's going to be talking extensively about these things tonight. And and of course, we announced that planckfire.com, the book, is now in print. You can order it from Tufan, Geometric Models. And by the way, check out planckfire.com. The Spanish version is in print and out and on Kindle. Also, we're getting famous. It's so fun. And just by way of a lead up to our guest speaker, honored speaker tonight, Tufan Guven, geometricmodels.org. Say hi to is to say that we had a very fun meeting here today. So that our friend Isis, who's a friend of daughter of Medric, a wonderful family here in South France, and Isis, after dozens of excited conversations, since she was in college for architecture anyway, and after me getting way over enthused, she has decided her graduate architecture thesis is going to be on bioarchitecture. So guess what Tufan and I did today? We gave her a whole pile of goodies, the Planck Fire set, basically, the new Planck book, and the golden ratio calipers. And she's so excited about showing this to other architects that we have decided we're writing a formal academic paper together, co-authors Dan and Tufan and Isis, and possibly Juan Schlosser, who will be coming with us in a few weeks, actually in May, who's putting up like a multi-million-dollar temple in India based on exactly these principles of implosion in architecture. Juan Schlosser will be joining us. It's now official in May. See it on the Fractal U calendar. It's newly up. And so as co-authors, we're going to be presenting a new paper with the solid, hard science that you present to skeptical professors, proving that if you want to make living architecture, here is the physics. So, Tufan is going to show you tonight that the tablet of Chumash, maybe you could hold that up for a second, that the tablet of Chumash, the actual dimensions of the tablet, not only they're all golden ratio, but they're actually accurate golden ratio times Planck. Perfect Planck scaling, charge collapse. How did the ancients know that, by the way, DNA is exactly that, and the wavelengths of photosynthesis all are precisely golden ratio times Planck charge collapse? The ancients knew, and this is the perfect test device with the new Planck Tuner. So suddenly now we have a compelling argument to make to the library at architecture universities to prove that their library is actually obsolete about what is living architecture until you make a living electric field by using the right material and the right ratio and the right scaling to implode capacitance, exactly like the pyramid called the Hummer imploded the Schumann harmonics to make the longitudinal array called a gravity diode and global wireless power, pyramidwirelesspower.com. Point being is now we have a very, very solid case to prove to architecture universities at a physics level that we can now define what is a living building and what is sacred space. That if you made charge collapse, you imploded charge. We've measured the harmonics, the capacitance of the building as von Schlosser made the measures. We can prove by measurement what building causes a seed to germinate, what building made life, and of course, what building makes bliss. And the ancients obviously knew this, not just by ratio, but also by scale. So suddenly, once we prove biologically, electrically, what living architecture is, we can reinvent architecture. Hello. And we will have blissful buildings. And we think this is fun. Anywho, so we have actual young people that are interested enough to present this to professors, and we're happy about it. We think it's cool.
Definitely.
So without further ado now, I'm going to introduce Tufan Guven, geometricmodels.org, who has a very detailed presentation for us with beautiful graphics. Remember, Tufan is therapy for those who say Dan Winter talks too fast or Dan Winter uses too big of words. We now have therapy for this disease. It's called Tufan Guven. So take it away, Tufan. I'm going to pin your image here. Go ahead, Tufan. I'm going to move. Go ahead.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks for the remedy. Hi, everyone. This is Tufan Guven, representative at geometricmodels.org. Tonight, we are going to talk about the basic, very simple physics of charge collapse. We will understand the dynamics of it, starting from very simple concepts like what is fractality, what is golden ratio, and then moving on to more complex things like constructive wave interference and charge collapse, implosion, and tie it to the Planck constant. We'll talk about the Planck scale, and also we'll talk about my new invention and design based on Dan's famous formula for the universal frequency cascade, the Planck Tuner. So we'll go over those things slowly. In the first half of this presentation, we'll talk about fractality and golden ratio, very basic things. And then in the second half, we'll go into more details. So I'm going to share my presentation now. Share screen, presentation. And here we go.
It's not looking good.
All right. So, okay, let's first start with Plato. So this is my famous quote from Plato. He says, geometry will draw the soul towards truth and create the spirit of philosophy. So anyone who has spent a little bit of time on geometry will most probably understand this quote. I have personally felt this times of enlightenment when spending time thinking, contemplating about geometry, and hopefully it will bring enlightenment moments for you as well throughout the presentation and later on. So we'll start with fractality, what fractality is. Technically, fractal is a geometrical mathematical set that exhibits a repeating pattern displayed at every scale. So there needs to be two specific qualities of any type of fractal, which is self-similarity and repetition. So self-similarity is the fact that the pieces, the segments need to be similar to each other. They don't necessarily have to be 100% identical. A similarity is enough. And also a repetition, it has to be a repetitive systems. When you look at the examples in the below pictures, you will see that in each case, there is a repetitive and self-similar patterns that repeat each other. And some examples from the plant life, these are all fractal geometries provided by plants. This is the cauliflower. So cauliflower is one of the plants that's fascinating. As you go deeper into it, you will see the same repeating vortex form, repeating itself in smaller and smaller scales. It's like a psychoactive plant.
Yeah, beauty is nutritious.
Yes. So many different examples from plant life. It's just endless.
So beautiful.
Yeah. And when you look at the trees, it starts with a main trunk and then it gets into smaller pieces, and it repeats itself in the much smaller scales. This is also called a dendritic form. You can see the qualities of any type of fractal field: repetitive, self-similar, rivers, mountains. In nature, you find it everywhere. In landscape.
Perfect range.
Yeah, and we have seen it in temple designs. Because ancient civilizations, they knew fractality was the dominant player in the formation of the universal distribution of matter and energy, consciousness. So they also implemented this understanding, this knowledge to their temples. There are endless examples. From an architectural point of view, on the left side, you see that there's a main pattern with A, and then that pattern is repeated in much smaller scales, and the repetition is continued later.
And the implication is charge coherence. Oh.
Yes, we'll get to that. So there are many examples in Africa about fractal architectures from Ron Eglash, who have spent a lifetime there. So this one is from the Baila settlement. You will see that again at the bottom left, there's this main geometry which is repeated at smaller scales.
In the center is actually the shape of the house of the village leader or a shaman, which is fractal to the whole village. And then his altar in his house was fractal to that. So basically, they knew they had to implode charge to be sacred.
You are not muted, right?
I just unmuted for a second.
Okay. So again, Ron Eglash, you can find his videos on YouTube. Great guy. And we see those geometric patterns in the evolution of Islamic patterns in geometry. So throughout the Seljuks and Abbasi Caliphate, and later on the Ottoman Empire, you'll see that such specific geometries were implemented in their religious centers. And we have gone through those in our earlier classes. I'll just move on. One of the first examples of the Islamic geometry is from the Great Mosque of Cairo in Tunisia. This is from the year 670, and you will see these patterns here, which also shows us a similar geometry to charge implosion at center. And there are much more examples, different patterns, different frequencies with octal ratios or golden ratios with 1.618. There are pentagons, decagons, all sorts of different types of geometries are available. And this one is from Iran, Nasir Al-Mulk Mosque, quite beautiful. And fractal tilings in different temples. Here you can see the fractal tilings around the structures. And the understanding of fractality and its effect was covered in esoteric understandings. One of them is being in Sufism. There was a concept of the unity of being, which encourages people to look for God inside oneself and perceive the whole universe, including oneself, as the reflection of God. According to this philosophy, the universe on the macro level is a holographic model whose source is the energy, just like the neurons in the brain. On a cosmic scale, from the fractal and holographic universe perspective, this means that each part of the world contains the whole of the universe as it's hidden inside each part. So here, the fractal qualities are being explained in this understanding. Moving on, we see in Hermetism, in the Emerald Tablet, it says that which is below corresponds to that which is above, and that which is above corresponds to that which is below, to accomplish the miracles of wanting. So fractal understandings, examples. Also, our bodies have fractal systems. From the left, we see the lymphatic system with a fractal distribution, along with the bloodstream. Then we see the lungs and the neurons. And an interesting fact about the neurons is its similarity to the nature of the universe, specifically the superclusters and how they are connected with each other. And there was a groundbreaking research in the Brandeis University by Mark Miller. They have analyzed the neurons of the brain cells, the connections, and they noticed that the qualities of the connection of the neurons are incredibly same with the qualities of the connections of the superclusters. So the neurons were very much resembled the nature of the universe on a bigger scale. And then this creates this question of, is the universe part of a larger mind, which is also part of an esoteric understanding in many different traditions. And a paper recently published in the Journal of Neuroquantology presents a unitary holofractogramic model that is redefining scientists' view of the physics of consciousness and the seamless interplay of information dynamics from the most fundamental levels of the universe to the living system and the cosmos as a whole. And this also brings the understanding of perfect inclusiveness, self-embedding, or entanglement, because also in that report, the consciousness in the universe were pictured as a toroidal field, which is embedded within each other at different scales, scale invariant. Also, from the architectural perspective, Buckminster Fuller, who was an American architect, systems theorist, author, designer, inventor, the designer of the geodesic dome structures, which allow safety and energy efficiency optimization. And I believe Dan spent some time with Bucky, right? So there are some examples from Bucky's structures or geometries we can see.
Bucky pioneered the vector flexor and how that led to charge collapse as well.
Yeah, basically these structures are they present the strongest organization of geometric connectedness to the strongest earthquake. That nothing happens to such structures, but they're very much intact. Also, modern world met with the concept of fractality with Benoit Mandelbrot. So he was a Polish-born mathematician. He is recognized for his contribution to the field of fractal geometry, which includes coining the word fractal, as well as developing the theory of roughness and self-similarity in nature. And while he was working at IBM, he developed computer graphics to create and display fractal geometric images, leading to his discovering the Mandelbrot set in 1979. It's his Mandelbrot set is quite famous. If you go onto YouTube and type the Mandelbrot set, you will see lots of beautiful visualizations expanding on the Mandelbrot set. And there are different fractal systems after the exploration of the Mandelbrot set. There are like sets like counter set, Hilbert curve, and there are the Sierpinski fractal triangle, the Koch star. So we can see these in different geometries, different fractal systems. This is another example from the Mandelbrot set. And the New Scientist magazine brought this subject to their cover and brought this subject of fractal universe, asks us if we are living in a fractal universe, which we are actually, because we can see that from matter to energy, from consciousness to psychology, everything is fractal and everything is fractally organized and distributed. And what we are discovering here is that this distribution has an intelligence, and we can understand the fundamental functions behind this intelligence, which is perfected charge distribution through charge collapse. We'll get into that later. So fractal patterns in quantum field. So you can see the interactions of waves emitted by the electrons. And another research here, scientists discover fractal patterns in a quantum material. So there are multiple researchers finding out fractal systems in the quantum world as well. So on the left, you see a mathematical programming of fractality. As you zoom into a specific portion, the same system, the same pattern repeats itself. And on the right, you see a tree. And on the tree, you see the dendritic forms, which also repeat themselves. So in the geometric, in the computer programming, you can create like 100% identical fractal systems, but in nature, nothing is 100% the same. There's similarity with small differences, but they still repeat each other. And then they implemented this technology to computer games such as Minecraft, and this was the first basic computer game which implemented this understanding. You can see the fractal distribution of graphics here, little pixelized. And then another one which was interesting is the No Man's Sky. So I think they created this game maybe 6-7 years ago. What was interesting about this game is that they created 18 quadrillion planets with different fauna and flora and different physical laws, gravitational systems, everything different. And when you think about it, how can a game company can create 18 quadrillion planets? It's unbelievable. But what they did is they used simple fractal formulas such as, okay, create this planet, and the next planet use the specific formulas like the trees will be 1.6 times longer or shorter, and the fauna will be 1.6 times this and that. So very simple mathematical calculations. You can just create endless, infinite amounts of planets or systems in computers. So golden ratio perfected fractal charge collapse is the fundamental formula of this universe. So we have seen about the fractal distributions, but what is important is that the golden ratio perfection is critical here, and we will talk about it, and which is also the electrical origin, cause, and mechanism of all centripetal and self-organizing forces, including and especially gravity, life force, perception, bliss, enlightenment, end of addiction, ADD, alphabet, symbol, and color by Dan Winter. So golden ratio is this infinite number that starts with 1.618. Actually, it's a relationship among two systems. And that relationship was first seen in the pyramids. The Egyptians have used the golden ratio in the design of the Greek pyramids. And later on, we see it with the Sumerians. They have used the golden ratio in some of their tablets, which is the tablet of Shamash. We'll talk about this later. This is the actual size of the tablet of Shamash, and the exact divisions of this tablet fits perfectly with the divine proportion. Later on, Greeks have used the golden ratio in their design of the Parthenon, and later Plato, in his views on natural science and cosmology, presented in his Timaeus, considered the golden section to be the most binding of all mathematical relationships and the key to the physics of the cosmos.
I really like the term most binding there, because we're saying all bonding is phase locking, the nature of bonding, and the optimum form of phase locking actually is phase conjugate golden ratio. So indeed, it is the center of the most implosive bonding.
Yes. And later Euclid in Elements referred to dividing a line at the 0.618 point as dividing a line in the extreme and mean ratio. So this gave rise to the use of the term mean in the golden mean. He also linked it to the construction of a pentagram. Now, what's important here is that Euclid suggests us to divide a line from the 0.618 as the mean point. But wherever university you go or school you go and ask any student to divide a line into two, everyone would divide it into 0.5 point from the exact middle. But the understanding was much different before. They would cut it slightly off the middle point, which intersects with the exact golden ratio. So that was the sacred division. So, okay, we'll go to there later, but when you cut that from the 6.1, you will get a harmonious proportion that allows the connection among the segments, the small segment to the large segment and the large to the whole. It preserves the ratio of golden section. And later, Leonardo Fibonacci discovered the unusual properties of the numerical series that now bears his name, the Fibonacci sequence. And Leonardo da Vinci provided illustrations using the golden mean extensively for a dissertation published by Luca Pacioli in 1509 entitled The Divine Proportion. So this was the start of the Renaissance era. And later, Johannes Kepler discovered of the elliptical nature of the orbits of the planets around the sun, also made mention of the divine proportion. And he basically figured out how charge collapse created the gravitational pull effect within the solar system through golden ratio arrangements and Platonic solid embedding. We'll also come to that later.
Yeah, we were very excited because, Kepler said Platonic nest is a model of planetary orbitals. And now we know Platonic nest creates golden ratio charge collapse. And that charge collapse is how you stabilize gravity and thus planetary orbitals. So he was right.
So this is one example of dividing a segment from the golden ratio point. You see that if you cut it not from the middle, but slightly off from the 0.618, you will have a harmony within the segments through the golden ratio. So the small segment to the larger segment will have golden ratio, and the larger segment to the whole will maintain the golden ratio. So there is unity among systems, and this allows the wave physics to successfully transfer energy or to collapse in an optimized way. And I also want to talk about the constructive wave interference. We talked about golden ratio, and if you have a golden ratio geometry next to each other as a system, then we have to understand the quality of the system. So there is a specific specialty about the golden ratio system, which is containing both arithmetic and geometric mean at the same time. So this only has, golden ratio is the only ratio in the mathematics of universe who has the both geometric and arithmetic means together. None of the other ratios have this capacity. Because of this unique ability, golden ratio is the only solution to constructive wave interference. And what we mean by arithmetic mean is that if you add up any two numbers next to each other, you will get the following one. For example, starting from the smaller scale, 0.382 added to 0.618, you have 1. 1 added to 0.618, you have 1.618, and so on. It gives the next number. And the geometric mean means that when you take any number and multiply it with the golden ratio, which is 1.618, again, you get the second number in the series. So this is called the geometric mean. And as I said, golden ratio is the only ratio which has the arithmetic and the geometric mean together. And this allows a constructive wave interference in a wave system. If the waves are arranged to focus at a center point through the golden ratio, then this creates automatic constructive wave interference. And one of the examples in geometry is the star system. When you look at a typical star, its dimensions perfectly align with that proportions. For example, the red line, which is the longest line, when divided by the green line, gives 1.618. And again, the green line divided by the purple line gives 1.618, and the purple line divided by the pink line, again, gives 1.618. So there's the integrity of the proportion, which creates this constructive wave interference. So the waves have this optimum way of collapsing at center. They spend the least amount of energy to move forward.
Or to compress. If you would go back to the previous slide just briefly.
Sure.
So, it was intuitively obvious to us when we wrote the physics paper that, yes, this is a solution to constructive wave interference, but the actual proof in wave mechanics, with the help of my assistant mathematicians, Martin Jones and Bill Donovan, now Elizabeth, we used generalized wave equations called Navier-Stokes and Klein-Gordon, series of generalized wave equations to prove that, in fact, golden ratio is the maximum form of constructive wave interference, which is to say how you conserve the inertia of the wave pattern, no destructive wave interference during that implosive compression. And that directly leads to the fact that if you solve the problem of compression, you solve the problem of gravity, alchemy, all the big problems. If you solve that simple problem of compression, constructive wave interference. Thank you, Tufan.
So we have seen the fractal systems, different fractal systems, and I would like to point another important thing is that when fractal systems are arranged by golden ratio, have this unique quality of being negentropic. And when fractal systems are arranged in the opposite with opposite qualities, then they have a different effect. And I have presented here two pictures with both qualities for you, and I would like you to meditate on those two pictures for 10 seconds, 20 seconds, and see how you feel about those geometric patterns. And if anybody wants to share their views on the comment section, on the chat box, please feel free to write your comments.
Yeah, the pen seems far more attractive than square.
Yeah, I feel you. So then we come to charge collapse. Again, moving on from our previous star pattern. So we have seen that the star pattern naturally has this golden ratio in its dimensions. And if you continue to draw the star pattern in the inner pentagon, so you will continue to have continued systems of golden ratio, an integrity of proportions going towards center, which is the most crucial part in understanding charge collapse, because in golden ratio perfected fractal charge collapse, you have this integrity of golden ratio where waves meet at specific golden ratio intervals.
That is the point here. I just love this, Tufan, that, physics had already agreed charge collapse is a mechanism of consciousness and charge collapse is because of gravity. And no one asks what's the cause of charge collapse when it's staring us in the face, right? And
Yeah.
actually, this is the top-down view of the Star Mother kid also, right?
As well. So actually, it is quite simple. We just need a continued system of phi integrity, a system where phi is automatically integrated in, as Dan said, like the star mother kit, where you will see this fractal nesting of dodecahedron on the top and icosahedron inside, where the stellation of each system represents the second one. The dodeca represents icosahedron, and icosa creates the dodeca. So this is the also nature of the universe, how universal mass is arranged, where we will come to it soon.
Which we proved is how hydrogen is built.
So stabilizing gravity, which is self-organization perfected by golden ratio. Now, when we say stabilizing gravity, we have to think about where we see gravitational forces, like we see them in molecules, we see them in atomic structures, we see them in solar systems, in galaxies, or even in universe, as well as our consciousness. Our consciousness have gravitational points where we focus, we create this gravity of energy. So golden ratio in quantum physics, while working on the Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, researchers for the first time observed and measured the signatures of a nanoscale symmetry showing the same attributes as the golden ratio.
Remember that the E8 complex nest is, which they're referring to here, the E8 is in effect a superset of what is the star mother kit.
Right.
And Garrett Lisi famously showed that the E8 superplatonic nest, which is based on golden ratio, that's evident, is also perhaps the ultimate model for the way the subatomic particles nest. So when they were studying E8, they were actually studying star mother and golden ratio, and they're showing that that is the predictor of subatomic nesting.
Yes. And golden ratio in the radii of hydrogen discovered by Dan Winter. So Dan has successfully laid out the formula of how the radii of hydrogen is specifically situated in golden ratio proportions to each other. It's like the cloud of the electron shells, right, Dan?
Yes, the ionized hydrogen electron radii. And we have to acknowledge Mark Rohrbauer for helping me on the graphic here.
Yeah, so we see that starting from the micro, there are all sorts of golden ratio proportions that dominates the quantum world. So because golden ratio is crucial in molecular biology as well, researchers are working on ways to implement this understanding in molecular nanotechnology. And another fascinating thing is that this dodecahedron plankton has been found for 66 million years and survived the KPG mass extinction that resulted in the demise of 76% of species with fossil record, including 90% of calcareous nanofossils. So I wonder if it has anything to do with the geometry.
Because it could do compression without collapse. Incidentally, we'll get to it, but the Buckminster fullerene for carbon is precisely that geometry. The ultimately famous nanomaterial, Buckminster fullerene, is essentially a star mother geometry of carbon atoms, which is the hottest subject in modern chemistry, fullerenes, because there's magic in the middle.
Yeah, you can see that this plankton has the same geometry as a dodecahedron. Also a recent article. So in this article, the author also suggests that the atomic structures are specifically arranged by golden ratio. And he says, quote, "My mathematical discovery described in chapter 5 shows that phi defines the structure of the atomic nucleus." And we'll go back to this article again later. And this is a poster from geometric models. And at the bottom part, you see that there is the dance of the Venus and Earth. And in 8 years, as Venus and Earth orbit the sun, they create this 5-petal flower pattern, which is specifically have golden proportions. And we're just reminding our subject of stabilizing gravity through golden ratio. So when we look at the solar system, we see all sorts of phi relationships among the planets in the golden system, which is also beautifully depicted by the spirasolaris.ca website. Spirasolaris.ca has calculated and beautifully demonstrated all the golden ratio relationships among the planets through the Fibonacci sequence here. You can see the calculations. So they are here, they are there. So it's clear that golden ratio is the dominant function that stabilizes gravity from starting from micro to macro.
It's so major, like it's absolutely a smoking gun. If golden ratio is the dominant geometry of all orbital mechanics, in other words, there's no other orbital mechanic geometric that's more common than golden ratio, then that would be a smoking gun. That's how gravity is stabilized.
Yeah, there have been so many Nobel awards that were granted to people who have discovered the golden ratio in different systems. It's like the next Nobel Prize will be given to the person who cannot find the golden ratio at any given self-organizing system.
Or the person who figures out why objects fall to the ground.
So most probably everyone knows about the golden ratio divisions in human body in biology, but it's all around us as well. And not everyone has specific ratios. Of course, our faces change from one another, but the dominant geometry with the faces as well is the golden ratio. So they have found out that as the proportions of the face gets closer to golden ratio, the attractiveness of that person also increases automatically. So there's this attraction of the soul towards the divine system philosophy. And thanks to Patrick Botti and Dan Winter, we have the Flaming Mind application, which beautifully displays the golden proportions in the brain waves. And when people have bliss experiences or when they are in deep meditation, you can very easily measure the golden ratio proportions among the peak levels of their brain frequencies from beta, delta, theta, and so on. And we are going to have a class with Patrick Botti on the 18th of February, where Patrick will be announcing the new Piers of Fire. So I would suggest everyone to listen to that as well. And as said, fractality is dominant everywhere, also in consciousness and also in our dream states. And while talking about dream states, I would like to announce Jennifer Bell's presentation, which will be on the 14th of April. So that's going to be very nice as well. So I encourage everyone to come and join us.
We're hypothesizing that since golden ratio cascades in brain waves and golden ratio cascades in electric fields like Therify actually increase the tendency to lucid dream. People have lucid dreams when they implode, and we think that it's because when you compress, implode your aura, what comes out the center of the pine cone squirt gun is coherent longitudinal. And that stuff, that coherent longitudinal array, is what you must propagate in order to navigate in the lucid dream and therefore die successfully. So it's a very complete electrical theory of not just what enables lucid dreaming, but what enables death. And me being an electrical engineer, I can talk about the theory pretty well, but when it comes to steering a group doing lucid dreams, you need someone with perhaps a little more shamanic background, and indeed Jennifer Bell. So anyway.
Yes. So this one is a picture from the sacred geometry poster where we see dominant golden ratio frequency in the DNA system. And well, in addition to that, last year, I and together with Dan Winter, we discovered that the specific dimensions of the DNA, the height and width of one DNA helix, which is 21 angstrom to 34 angstrom, also fits exactly to the Planck scale. So the DNA not only have the golden ratio, but it perfectly fits to the Planck scale, which tells us something more, actually, which we will come
Charge
in a couple
collapse
of
in
slides.
DNA.
Yeah. And there's this video of Dan back in 2 years ago, huh? Right?
More like 30.
So I encourage everyone to go and listen to this
Bit younger then.
video. He talks about the purpose of DNA. It's a great video. I'm sure many of you have watched it already. I watched it maybe 4 or 5 times before. It's just great. So because golden ratio is not a whole number, the nature has found a way to follow the divine ratio, because the nature works with whole numbers. You cannot get 1.618 apple. You get either 1 or 0. So the nature has created its own system to go to that perfect array. And it's through the Fibonacci sequence, as we went through in the history of golden ratio. So you will notice that the golden ratio has this arithmetic mean, which is the addition of 2 numbers give the following number in the series. For example, 1 plus 1 equals to 2, 1 plus 2 equals to 5, 2 plus 3 equals to, 1 plus 2 equals to 3, 2 plus 3 equals to 5, and so on. It goes until forever within the Fibonacci sequence. And the other interesting ratio, the thing is that as you divide the numbers, as you divide 2 numbers in the series to each other, for example, 1 divided by 1 is 1 in this red bordered chart. And then 2 divided by 1 is 2, and then 3 divided by 2 is 1.5. As you continue dividing 2 numbers in the series to each other, you will reach to that horn type geometry. It's like a vortex, and it very much resembles to the Gabriel's horn, the Judgment Day. Only the shareable waves will be accepted. So as said, in the nature, golden ratio system is clearly observed within the patterns of the plants. As they give the leaves, they follow this specific numeric system. And also with specific flowers, you see the number of petals develop according to the Fibonacci sequence. This is the most dominant sequence that you see in the flowers. Of course, there are petal systems like 4 or 6 as well, but we are talking about a dominance here.
And they call it maximum exposure, minimum superposition, which is the perfect way to share the light, or the perfect way to share.
And this also takes us to charge distribution efficiency. This is why the plants are organizing themselves in the golden ratio. For example, with the spiraling systems, be it a sunflower or a pine cone, the number of spirals of such systems will follow those Fibonacci sequence as well. For example, with the pine cones, while there are 8 spirals going to one direction, and there are 13 spirals going to the other direction. So 8 and 13 are also within the Fibonacci sequence. And I like the symbolism where pine cones are present, that they represent the charge distribution efficiency, also connecting it to the pineal gland. And charge collapse in Renaissance. So as we said, Leonardo da Vinci, with the presentation of Leonardo da Vinci in Luca Pacioli's book, The Divine Proportion, we have seen many paintings of the golden ratio, and some of the other very famous paintings are the examples from Michelangelo. The creation of Adam is exactly divided from the golden section. So there are deep messages in each one of these paintings.
It's interesting that Tesla even started with the perfect arc, the perfect spark gap that makes the arc. So the spark gap between those two fingers is a very profound, it's implosive charge right in that touch.
Yeah. And this one is again from Leonardo da Vinci, John the Baptist, pointing the exact phi, the divine ratio. So almost all painters during the Renaissance period, they were obsessed with the golden ratio. I have a collection of tens of paintings which display the golden ratio, but I just wanted to show you a couple of them. I'm not going to go to each one of these. So charge collapse on Earth. Again, one of my discoveries is that I realized that the capital of Turkey, which was decided in 1923 during the creation of the republic, was exactly put on the golden ratio point. So the district in the capital, which is the Çankaya district in Ankara, exactly sits on the golden ratio points. And I calculated specifically the longitudes and both the parallels, and the exact latitude and longitude point perfectly points the parliament of Turkey. So this was, I believe, deliberately designed by Atatürk.
Atatürk, again, your hero.
And also, we see the grid system based on golden ratio in the energy grid of the world. In the 60s, Russian researchers found a matrix while they were looking for a model to connect the significant locations in history. And the matrix had 12 pentagons and interconnections, making it a fractal dodecaihedral grid symmetry. So we can see a 2D picture of that world map from our sacred geometry poster. And the Star Mother Kit also presents the same geometry as shown. So it's the negentropy, literally fractal conjugate space-time. And as we said, this is what also a great player in the stabilization of the gravity, among other things. And while we are talking about those specific node points, nodal arrays on Earth, then we'll be giving a presentation on pyramid wireless power on the 7th of April. Do you want to say a couple of words about it then?
Yeah, just that the idea is that the pyramid was called the Hummer because by humming accurately tuned to the phase conjugate pump wave, which is the accurate harmonics of the Schumann cascade, that low frequency infrasound hum in the piezoelectric pyramid meant that the pyramid was imploding the electrical inertia of the Earth, the Schumann cascade, the perfect implosive hum. And that implosion would then spit out at the center of compression, pyramid, the fire in the middle of the pyramid, would spit out coherent longitudinal inertia into the array, the dodecaihedral of the Earth grid. And that's how global wireless power was created, because it could then be picked up at the other nodes on that array, literally the Star Mother Kit. So that wireless power was a longitudinal array. And the pyramid was literally humming because, and this is called a gravity diode. The Arcturians talked about it. It's a very fascinating concept. So more on that when we get to that lecture.
A few slides to go. Charge collapse in space, Platonic nesting based on phi. So the leading hi-fi companies, they have discovered that if you can arrange the space where you play music, it can be a concert hall or it can be your house. If you can arrange the dimensions of the space, like your wall or your ceiling, to the golden ratio, you eliminate the unwanted standing waves. So this is called the Stradivarius phi chamber. So in any type of room, when you play music, sometimes you hear specific frequencies are increased or low. For example, when you go to the corner of the room, you'll say a higher level of bass frequency. But if you can arrange the room in golden ratio, at least two dimensions can be arranged by golden ratio, then you will have a successful rate of eliminating the unwanted standing waves. So this is quite telling, because there are different types of waves. But if this can be achieved with the sound waves, this can be achieved with other wave systems as well. And yeah, this brings us to the subject of temples, which we will come soon.
And they say that the Stradivarius then also had sacred ground gemstones, piezo, in the varnish, as in the Red Violin movie. And that meant as a capacitor, it was implosive, parallel to that it's phonon or sound implosive. And that's why your hair stands up when they play the Stradivarius more, because it's literally implosive capacitor, which the sound, the perfect echo, is more than metaphor for. Implosion in sound is implosion in charge.
Thank you. And Kepler, in his book Mystery of the Cosmos, he talked about a system, a solar system that is based on both golden ratio and the Platonic nesting. So this was a very detailed explanation of how the planets in the solar system are arranged. For example, he would relate Mercury with an octahedronal system and Venus sitting outside that octahedral system with an icosahedron, and then Earth sitting outside that icosahedral system with a dodecahedral system, and so on. So this was the famous drawing of Kepler's solar system model on the bottom right. And Pythagoras has this famous quote. He says that there is geometry in the humming of the strings, and there is music in the spacing of the spheres. And we talked that about the golden ratio pattern within the solar system, stabilizing the gravity. And another very interesting research paper talking about the dodecahedral space topology as an explanation of weak wide angle temperature correlations in the cosmic microwave background. So what they did is that they mapped the frequency temperature mapping of the whole universe, and they wanted to see if any type of 3D geometric patterns would fit to this microwave background. And they noticed that none of the geometries except for one fit the system. The only system that fitted that specific microwave background was the dodecahedron system. So this showed that the universe was arranged in a dodecahedral geometry, and that what we are also theorizing, that this specific relationship of the divine proportion is what holds the mass, holds the systems, holds gravity together.
Makes it centripetal, exactly.
So there are some visual representations of this charge collapse through the Platonic solids, that maybe it can be helpful to visualize that in each one of these phases, one can visualize a vortex field that is going to the center, as you see on the left side.
It's literally 6 pairs of 60-degree vortex cones, perfect implosion cones. And that's how we designed the imploder.
And Nature magazine asks, is this the shape of the universe? But we go further than that. It's not only the shape, it's also fractal. So the fractal universe is fractal, and it's based on golden ratio. Some pictures of a fractal dodecahedron. Some nice depictions. And so this was major news. In a couple of years ago, they discovered the M87 black hole. And then few years later, they received another picture, more refined picture of this black hole, looking like a vortex. But later on, a researcher came out and said that that is not the actual picture of it. What they did was they cropped the picture and just took out that ring. But actually, this ring is exactly located in this picture on the left. The original picture was originally cut from this picture on the left. You see that the M87 black hole has a complex dodecahedral geometry, a contrast brightness enhanced image of the M87 black hole shadow shows a polypentagonal structure indicating a complex structure of the M87 supermassive black hole, which may be the result of an O5 Poincare dodecahedral space universe. And if you can apply the geometry of the dodecahedron in this top right picture, you will see that it can be distorted because of the gravitational strong effect of the black hole, but you can see the signs of a dodecahedral shape in that picture if you overlay the geometry there. So, but the mass media preferred to just crop it and just present it like a small ring. But actually, it's much more than that. It very much looks like a dodecahedral shape.
And in fact, Poincare can be said to be famously the physicist who made the dodecahedron famous in physics.
Yes. So the author goes on and says, an atomic nucleus, therefore, mainly consists of dodecahedral shaped shells, but stable icosahedral and hexagonal cubic shells also appear in certain elements. Constant phi, which directly appears in geometry of the dodecahedron and icosahedron, seems to be the fundamental constant that defines the structure of the atomic nucleus and the structure of the wave systems, orbitals, which form the atomic nucleus. This is what we have been saying.
We have this elaborate website about the fact that the electron shells, the DNF subshells, are dodecaecosa. And then also the Moon, the chemist, showed that the geometry of the hadrons in the nucleus, the protons and the neutrons, are also platonic and in fact dodecaecosa. So in fact, your chemistry teacher forgot to tell you.
Moving on to charge collapse in architecture. So you remember we talked about the 5 chambers of Stradivarius, where you align at least 2 dimensions of the space to golden ratio and you eliminate the unwanted standing waves. And my favorite quote from my hero, perfect compression creates perfect charge distribution.
And also bliss.
Exactly. And when we look at the temple designs, the temples that I have examined, without exceptions, all of them had golden ratio. None of them had nothing. Like each one of them, especially the country that I live in, Turkey, has like tens of dozens of temples everywhere. So I always take my golden ratio ruler with me, and whenever I see this plan of the temple in the entrance, I just take it out and measure it, and I always find the golden ratio. And the one at the top is the Temple of Apollo in Didyme, and the one at the bottom is Parthenon in Athens, Greece. And there's something common that they both share, is that while both of them have the golden proportions in their architectural floor plans, the exponents is the same. So the shorter side is multiplied with the exponents of golden ratio to the power of 2. I don't know if I could express that mathematically correct. So it means that the shorter side times golden ratio to the power of 2 gives the longer side. And that specific golden rectangle is also present in the geometry of the dodecahedron. So I will help you see this long golden ratio rectangle. If you look at the tip of my fingers, you will notice a golden ratio rectangle. I don't know if it's all visible or not, but this specific rectangle is repeated 20 times inside a dodecahedron. So I call these temples a dodecahedral temples. And the golden ratio symmetry is present in very famous systems like Stonehenge. And also churches, cathedrals, and many religious temples have this specific golden ratio. This one is in Budapest, that almost all of the churches that I have measured, they all contain the divine proportions in their multiple perspectives, multiple dimensions. So they were deliberately created by golden ratio. And this one is very interesting. This one is from Krakow, the Saints Peter and Paul Church. You will see that there are three different arrangements of golden ratio. It's not only two columns that look like golden ratio, but the whole column system is based on golden ratio here. This is the side view. And when you look at this church from the front, same principle repeats itself. All the columns are exactly arranged with golden ratio proportions. So in wave mechanics, this one is from Dan Winter's study. He has measured the effects of wave meeting points and resulted the exact charge distributing and charge isolating points among waves. And he has showed that the point where charge distribution efficiency is maximized is exactly on the golden ratio point, which is 1.618, the above part of this chart. At the bottom part, you see the octave frequency is maximized, is the most at the most destructive point. Do you want to say a couple of words about this chart then?
Yes. So if you simply do mathematical modeling and you mathematically cause interference, when the ratio of the two waveforms is golden ratio, you get maximum constructive result. Whereas when you reach the octave point, you get the maximum destructive result. That doesn't mean the octave is evil, but it just means it prevents further cascades. What that means in practice is that cubic octasymmetry tends to fix or freeze the wave in place because it cannot distribute, perfect for snowflakes or ice. Whereas when you use golden ratio, you create implosion and infinite distribution. So it doesn't mean that the square root of 2 is, or the octave is evil, but it means it is preventing further distribution, whereas golden ratio invites further distribution. In practice, it means in your house, you use a cube or the square space to create privacy, and where you use the golden ratio space to create sharing.
Yes, and as we can see from this geometry, phi is the only ratio which allows wavelengths to both add and multiply constructively.
Perfect sharing.
So I'll go fast a little bit. Let's move on to tuning to Planck constant. So I will just remind the famous quote from Tesla. He says, if you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration, and I suggest to do so as well. So a wave system is specifically in physics, a wave is an oscillation accompanied by a transfer of energy that travels through a medium. When you throw a stone to a pool or to the water, you will see the wave pattern going outwards. So any sine wave looks like a cross section of that wave that you see on the water. And the universe is also comprised of frequencies, of waves. And all the waves start at specific points, which we call the Planck constant. And our friend Dan Mack gave this beautiful example linking this Planck constant to the pixel of the television. So this is the smallest scale that you cannot break into two. So in mathematics, there's also the explanation available on Wikipedia. But the interesting point that Dan has provided is that all the important biological, mechanical functions and the important orbital celestial bodies exactly coincide with the golden ratio exponents of Planck constant or Planck length. So this is the important information that we have, I suggest we all understand, because this is also the fundamental mechanism that lies under all sorts of gravitational effects, the science of consciousness, sacred geometry, mechanics of waves, and everything. So that chart shows, starting from the micro, the exact ADP and ATP functions of the cell. Those specific frequencies work on that exact 5 multiples of Planck, as well as the diameters of one DNA 10 codon turn, 20 to 34 angstroms, plus the photosynthesis 2 exact frequencies. They also fit to this Planck scale, and the Earth year, the Schumann period, Venus Earth years, precision of the equinox, and the galactic year as well. So all of these matches cannot be a coincidence. So these are the most fundamental functions of our reality. So an easier way to understand this is to remember what we talked about, the constructive wave interference, where there are multiple golden ratio relationships that is embedded together in a system, which creates this constructive wave interference. So we can visualize this as a vortex field or an expanding field from a center point like Planck center or Planck length. So charge collapse tuned to Planck, implosive compression through golden ratio perfected phase conjugation at fractal modes. So this is a symbolic picture, but I suggest we visualize charge implosive geometries in the exact meeting of waves to better understand this formula. So if we can understand that at each node where waves meet, there's this quality of the etheric force or chi or prana or charge that wants to create gravitational pull and create negentropic field, which we called a charge resonance to Planck. So at these exact nodes, we see these important functions that are being brought to life, like the ADP, ATP, or photosynthesis, or the presence of DNA, and so on. So when we look at this chart again, we can visualize those exact vortexes, vortex fields, implosive fields that present this charge collapse. And I don't know, would you like to add anything here, Dan?
Well, as so well said, that essentially by imploding the charge collapse precisely tuned to Planck and golden ratio, that implosion is what makes it centripetal, and thus the origin of all centripetal forces. And that implosion sucks to center. At the implosive center, self-organization, that is to say, any wave that does not fit is canceled, and thus the origin of negentropy, which is profound because that, in a sense, is the definition of the origin of life and gravity and consciousness. So it's a relatively profound idea.
So since we now know the physics, we can successfully implement this to architecture or other technological devices that provide wellness and increased life quality. And based on that, as we went through, I have recently designed this Planck ruler specifically tuned to Planck constant, the Planck length. And we talked about this last week, so I'm not going to go into details again, but this is just based on the measurements of the integers here as these measurements align with the segment of the ruler, you see these set of three numbers here. Each set of three numbers correlate to the three segments of the ruler. So you understand that when you measure, when you are measuring any system, or if you want to create something, it can be a plan, it can be an artwork. When you do your drawing based on these specific dimensions, you will be able to optimize your charge collapse in this system. You will be able to create a negentropic field, at least optimize the efficiency of that field. And we have seen this in the tablet of Shamash. So the tablet of Shamash was specifically arranged with these dimensions. There is a 1 centimeter gap compared to the exact phi scaling, but this might be by the depreciation of the tablet over time, I suggest, because this has been created thousands of years ago.
The thing Tufan and I noticed today is if you take Tufan's Planck Tuner at full unpacking, it's Planck times golden ratio to exactly 1/64 power, which is exactly 1 British foot. So
Yes.
At full expression, this is 1 foot. And that's where the whole table from John Michel starts, with the fact that the British foot is sacred.
Yes.
Sacred dimension was charge collapse. And this is the perfect way to start.
Yeah. At the bottom right, you see John Michel's diagram where he explains about the sacred foot. And as Dan pointed out, the largest measurement alignment of this ruler points the exact 1 foot, which is this charge resonant dimension.
Phi to the 1/64 power right here is right there.
Yes.
So it's a perfect coincidence.
Yeah. So Tablet of Shamash, some facts about the Tablet of Shamash and the Golden Spiral puzzle is that it contains 3 consecutive phi rectangles perfectly embedded in the tablet itself. So the Sumerians designed the most popular, their most popular, most important tablet dedicated to the sun god. Tablet of Shamash has 3 consecutive phi rectangles embedded perfectly.
And in Planck scale.
Yes, and in Planck scale, tuned to Planck constant by its dimensions. And the measurements are indicated next to the tablet, as with the tablet's actual size. I can also show these.
So the ancients actually knew.
Yeah.
We should move on to questions soon here. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Last 3.
Because we have some fun questions.
Yeah. Okay. So once you start compiling, once you start putting the pieces together, just creates the tablet, and you can measure it with the Planck Tuner.
Beautiful example. Beautiful example.
And another example from the Eastern Roman Empire. So this is the Omphalion, called the Navel of the Earth, is a marble section of the floor in Hagia Sophia where Roman emperors were crowned during the coronation ceremony. So the preliminary measurements indicate dimensional coherency of the geometry's main square and the circles with the universal frequency cascade, as we just talked, formulated by Dan Winter. And these indicate charge resonance and fractal phase conjugation by golden ratio tuned to Planck constant. And last slide is about the Planck set that is being distributed through geometricmodels.org, where you can find the specific tools for education that are all tuned to Planck. So my second lecture is on the 17th of March about the physics of implosion toroidal dynamics. We will go more into the qualities of toroidal fields, the centripetal and centrifugal forces. And if you have any questions, I'll be pleased to answer.
That was super. Tufan went to a lot of work, and I thought the graphics themselves were just spellbinding and beautiful and so useful. Thank you. And you folks have been so patient, and we have some fun questions. And let's start playing with them. So the first one was, will this be recorded? Yes. So this is streaming live on YouTube, and the film will also play on our YouTube channel named Dan Winter Fractal Field. The next was question, but do you have Joe Champion's book? Joe Champion, remember, was the guy who famously said there was a specific temperature which would catalyze the alchemic isotope transition. You could literally, for example, change aluminum to silver. We learned later, we wrote more detailed equations. Not only do you need the temperature, you need the frequency to catalyze isotope transition. So we'll do more on that next week when we're talking about alchemy. Next question down. Somebody asked, if you're going to share this slideshow, Tufan, they want to know.
For sure, definitely. Most probably Dan will help sharing this.
Yes. Is there a place we can find this presentation after? So we're going to put the slideshow up because it's so wonderful. Really, it's a great summary and very fun to do. So look for that link at Fractal U when we put this film link up very shortly in the next few days. Next question. Looking for step-by-step procedures to use Therify with music and Flame in Mind technology. What do I need to connect it together? And I lack the skills. Well, that is a little bit beyond the scope of tonight's presentation, but let me just do 1 minute on that. So the Therify at 500,000 volts is not really set up for external modulation. So external modulation from Flame and Sound at flameinmind.com is beautiful and fun inside Plasma Fire and inside Piezo Fire and inside Quantify. They directly use implosive harmonics from Flame and Mind. However, with the Therify, still, since the infrasound driving Therify is precisely the Bliss audio harmonics, which is the Bliss binaural sounds options in Flame and Sound, part of Flame and Mind. So using Flame and Mind to play the Bliss binaural audio, or even better, to measure golden ratio bliss in brainwaves with Therify or just before or after. You can actually do the sound, the bliss infrasound with Flame and Mind. So there's a way to use Flame and Sound indirectly with Therify and directly with Quantify Plasma Fire. Okay. And as we said, there's manuals there, so you can see that there more later when we get to the Therify session. It said, looks like a row of teeth. Mycelium is the same. Is someone saying that the axon to the dendrite ratio was ultimately golden ratio? It's very interesting today. That was Mederick and Christine, very fun. Next question. What's interesting in Dan's Sepstrom analysis sweep function shows charge distribution images peaks at 1.325, 1.466. I have to say that, remember, the second order power spectrum called a Sepstrom, which is the way I quantified internal phase coherence, the origin of the term heart coherence. Remember, when that amount of coherence in your heart goes up, it's literally a lie detector. You can tell when you speak your truth. But actually, the right-left movement of the peak of the Sepstrom was correlate directly simply to heart rate. And it's true, though, there's a scale of heart rates where heart rates based on 1.0, 60-second heart rate, a lower heart rate, were correlated to people who were kind of stuck in your head because it's very cubic, actually. Whereas the higher frequency heart rate, 0.618 on the Sepstrom scale, was actually the touchy-feely, like kindergartner teachers and people who hugged children. They had a different heart rate, and it was very archetypal, and there's ways to measure that. And we'll see more at realheartcoherence.com. But again, that's a bit beyond the scope of today's conversation. So let's go to more questions here. How many degrees does the node point rotation in the pentagram? I'm not sure exactly how to interpret the question, but essentially, pent is a 72-degree increments. And if you do that in 3D, then the nodes of the star mother dodecacosa are all exponents of golden ratio, the XYZ coordinate. Would it be accurate to say that each cell is collapsing charge through DNA's fractality? In a sense, that is what we're saying, is that the cell's ability to have immune system, harmonic inclusiveness, quantifying vitality, how long anything is going to live, an atom, a baby, or a galaxy, is the harmonic inclusiveness, which is the number of harmonics that can be compressed. And when the harmonics can be compressed well, that harmonic inclusiveness definition of your immune health also is a definition of successful compression or implosion. So another way to say that is when your heart rate is not variable, it means you're toast. When your heart rate is infinitely variable, it means you're healthy. Well, that's also true of cell membranes. If the cell membrane has maximum fractality foldedness, it's healthy. If the cell membrane is a perfect sphere, harmonic exclusive, it means you got cancer and you're toast. So it's a very interesting idea based on harmonic inclusiveness. And that article is goldenmean.info/holarchy. Can being in a sacred space built with a golden ratio protect us from EMF fields and microwave pollution? Next question here. Actually, we do have measurements showing the residual field of something harmonic inclusive, like Therify, has actually reduced electrosmog. And also Paul has experimented with pink noise, kind of harmonic maximum, creating, minimizing electrosmog, actually. So in principle, the generalized principle is that when you implode, and it's suction towards center, because all of the waves must pass through that same center, imploding heart, bliss, for example, that is self-sorting, literally excludes disease because the implosion point does the self-sorting. So only the wave that's shareable or can be distributed makes it through the center of the implosion. And that's behind what Tufan is saying today, is that, yes, if you build sacred space, I mean, conventionally, you go into a temple and you have some bliss, yes, you get sorted. Or as they say, after a good fight in an Irish pub, everyone says sorted because they did compression well. Can being in a sacred space build protect us? Yes, we read that. Likewise, does it amplify your own biofield? Yes, that's the idea, that when you get into an implosion place, a bliss temple, that your aura compresses well, and successful compression is the origin of all radiance. So it would unpack your bliss. Comment about fullerene there. So consciousness is related to gravity. How? Gravity is created by a byproduct or the polar force to consciousness. I'm doing a whole lecture on that, the Sufi exercise of why, when you're doing a Sufi dance, you track with your attention from your body center of gravity to the earth center of gravity to the sun center of gravity. And you can follow the center of gravities with your attention. For example, do the dervish turn without getting dizzy. So there's an absolute connection between center of gravity and center of consciousness. It's very profound. It's why the dervish proves he has pure intention if he does not get dizzy when he spins. If you meditate on what that means, it's profound physics. So we're going to have more fun with that later. So this process is defining how we can make, maintain, store, and distribute our body's plasma into quantum coherence field, like a body temp Bose-Einstein condensate, correct? So we're saying that Bose-Einstein condensate is an introduction to the fact that implosion creates longitudinal coherence, which can only survive in a perfected fractal array, dodecaecosa, which is the definition of gravity waves and the definition of the collective unconscious, that same coherent longitudinal array. So we think we've gone a lot further than Einstein in calling it a Bose-Einstein condensate. For example, they talk about that, about action at a distance, and we go into a lot more detail about that, but we won't do that here. It relates to mass as well, the size of the moon, yes. So not only does, because mass is only a name for how much inertia rotation stores, and you can only sustain rotation in the presence of a centripetal force at center. So if you don't know why objects fall to the ground, you're probably not going to know why anything is centripetal, and thus you're not going to know what holds the planets together. Let's move along here. So consciousness dictates the gravity. So in a sense, that which has the most perfect gravity, sustainable, is a clue to what is the nature of the most radiant consciousness. For example, the black hole at the center of most galaxies within this context would be seen as mindful. And that gets a bit heavy. but if you think about every ancient religion was called a sun god religion because they knew the most intelligent being in our solar system happened to be also the most gravitational. Ooh. So the relation between gravity and consciousness is something we need to meditate on in great depth. The pentodeca picture reminds me to ask a question. What images I need to visualize to make the cube to pentodeca shift? Yeah. So thank you for that. Adam put the perfect picture. Thank you, Adam, David. We're going down the question. You see there that the angle that you tilt a cube up. So the cube's rotating, and he's Tufan's going to hold up the image. The cube is rotating, and if you look inside the Star Mother, it's a little hard to see, but you can see on the Star Mother kit page, golden mean difference kit. If you tilt that cube at 32 degrees, the chin angle of the Sphinx, and then rotate it at that new axis and blink 5 times, that is a dodeca. So that way to embed a cube in a dodeca is literally the only doorway to the next dimension, because it is the only doorway into the next possible superposed axis of star charge spin symmetry. I've made a bunch of videos on the only physics of what is the next dimension, because the next dimension is only a name for the next axis of superposed spin, which will then show up in the power spectra of the harmonic inclusiveness, called the next density. The key is that you can't rotate a cube into a dodeca without using the golden ratio, which means you can't get to the next dimension, the next superposed spin, and the next compression. And why that's profound is that when they say it's other dimensional, what they mean is because of that golden ratio implosive compression of the cube in the dodeca, you get embedding into the longitudinal array, which we think of as the next dimension. It's literally the next array of charge distribution possibility. So imagine that if you superpose the rotation on the rotation, you braid the braid of the braid in the braid from the dodeca ratchet DNA, suddenly you can embed a very big array. And so that's why they say these very advanced multidimensional beings, the compression in their field is such that many humans would not even survive, because to inhabit that level of compression, you need to be a very shareable wave. We'll go into that later. He says, Morris says, God is the brain on the right. I like it, and connects with the array. Yeah, so the conversation in the chat window is. So Daniel Z is saying, Tufan, you touched on golden ratio and harmonic inclusiveness. Can you expand a bit more on golden ratio being the maximum constructive ratio for harmonic inclusiveness in the heart, and how this may tie in with the electrical signature of love? Well, I'll start, Tufan, but just to say, it's well known that when Manfred Klein documented the musical wave shape of love in touch, it was golden ratio in the moment of maximum compression. From the beginning to the end of the love hug, the point of maximum compression, called a love squeeze, waits tantrically until golden ratio into the duration of that perfect love hug. So indeed, that enables harmonic inclusiveness, which obviously golden ratio is the perfection of harmonic inclusiveness, which by definition is the definition of immune health and heart rate variability. So yeah, golden ratio, because it solves the problem of compression, allows harmonics to be inclusive. How did I do, Tufan?
That's great. Yes. Great. Thank you.
Because the Schumann resonance is increasing in frequency, will the pyramid hum still work? Well, what a great frequency! What a great question. Actually, even though Greg Braden tends to mislead people and think that the Schumann frequencies are increasing, actually, it's not quite the correct way to say it. Because the Schumann principal dominant harmonic, 7.83 hertz, is defined by the propagation of the speed of light around the circumference of the Earth as it bounces between the ionosphere and the surface like a ringing bell, the fundamental dominant of the Schumann harmonic is not increasing. Sorry, Greg Braden, that was a bit misleading. But the harmonic inclusiveness, which is to say the number of harmonics present in the Schumann cascade, oh yes, that can increase. In other words, suddenly that same ringing bell can ring with more harmonics at once. For example, equinox, solstice, or the photon cloud, which is to say the galactic equators. So as the Mayans knew, at the turning points of the galactic and solar equator, you get this massive compression wave of embedding, exactly the same way that Agnihotra works better at sunrise and sunset, even better at equinox and solstice, even better when the solar equator lines up with the galactic equator, the galactic the galactic symmetry wave, they call it the photon wave, the photon cloud. So yes, The orientation of our axis with respect to bigger and bigger axes of spin puts us in a position to have more bliss, literally a harmonic convergence, because we embed at those turning points, because of longitudinals, into that larger compressional array. Very practical example. There's a little aviary here with birds singing fabulously. I love it. It's wonderfully blissful. You walk by, it's only down the ravine. It's an amazing place here. But the point is, if you want to hear those birds sing at their best every day, you just walk by just before sunset. Now, why are all those birds singing their best every day just before sunset? Why? Because they're feeling a bigger array. It's why Agnihotra works, because you embed the short. And that's why Therify remote healing works better in sunrise, sunset also, because the longitudinal array is touched. Immediately makes me wonder about the laser pyramid humming personally. Yeah, the pyramid hums. Are you saying charge implosion causes goosebumps? Yes. That was a simple answer. Super micro black holes equal cellular interaction. Yes, that basically, if the center of hydrogen is a black hole, and the center of every DNA ladder rung is hydrogen, and the center of every water molecule, little black holes connect to bigger black holes, and therefore recursive construction of black holes. Yes, well, I'm reading down these questions. How am I doing? Okay, fractality and how the observer effect relies on consumed perspective. How this all gets sorted out. I love it. Yes, actually, study the eyeballs on peacock feathers. All the facets are in phase, and all of the eyeballs can consume perspective into one, exactly like the infinite number of facets on an insect eyeball. They're seeing it from a billion different facet faces on that crystal, but they're locked into phase in such a way that e pluribus becomes unum. So the peacock feather is teaching us that. And then Adam David put a beautiful picture. Black hole geometry reminds me of this. And he's got the big dodecahedron and the small dodecahedron, the small dodecahedron literally being a key in a lock. Thank you, Adam. It's a perfect picture. Nice gathering. That measuring tool is very significant. Thank you. That's a feather in your cap, Tufan, right there from
Thank you.
Dawn. Okay. What would you recommend as a planetary measuring reference point for golden ratio if the magnetic poles are shifting and the Schumann resonance is changing? Should we always reference Planck length to keep measurements sacred? Well, it's really true that we now know what frequencies and wavelengths do trigger charge collapse, Schumann harmonics, brainwave harmonics, and therefore where negentropy is possible. So in a widening gyre where the center cannot hold, ... the center is perfect fractal charge collapse. Even if I speed you up, Tufan, and slow Dan down, I still would need to watch this beauty more than once. Okay, great job, Tufan. That was awesome. Okay, we're doing good. Comments are good here. Is the whole intent to teach about interconnectedness so that we can start implementing it and connect to all? Great job. Yes. Interconnectedness is precisely the goal, and perfect interconnectivity is precisely implosive constructive interference. Yes, that was fire. Thank you, Tufan. I keep going back to the goosebumps. So if they are caused by charge collapse and are generally considered involuntary or not consciously controlled, being they're part of the autonomic nervous system, what would they say about volitionally generated piloerections, voluntarily controlled goosebumps? Physics of goosebumps is really interesting because when your hair stands up, if you ask a conventional biologist, what makes your hair stand up? The conventional biologist would say, well, you needed to raise your hair so you looked bigger so the bear would not eat you. That's what a conventional biologist says about why your hair stands up. But he's missed a few things. The reason your hair stands up when you have bliss is because you have imploded capacitance, literally a eureka, a Jimmy Willie, and that capacitance enables the compression that precedes radiance. And that radiance is your hair standing up because you've become an implosive capacitor. It's literally, if you suddenly think about something your ancestors want you to know, your hair will stand up. And that is a useful electrical indicator that you have located a shareable wave, important electrical information. Would the nodes of a dodecahedron be the most structurally sound since at these points perfect distribution is present? Yes, but there's a caveat here. If you put together a dodecahedron with flexible nodes, it's floppy. It is perfect compression, but if you start with a cube, tetracube, which is stable and has octave harmonics, and you wrap a dodecahedron around it, then you have both stability and compressibility. So around the architecture of a cubic lattice, you need cubic octave harmonics in your brainwave first, alpha to gamma, stability. Then you produce the golden ratio cascade from alpha to gamma. Now you got golden ratio and alpha harmonics in your brainwaves, and absolutely, not only is that the physics of bliss, we've proven it's how kids see without their eyes, and it's how Jean-Charles Moyen made teleportation with witnesses measurably, replicably. So it is the combination of having both stability and octave and golden ratio that enables psychokinesis in brainwaves. What is the significance of blinking 5 times when looking at the dodecahedron? Well, no, what it is, you have a cube. You lift the cube up 32 degrees. Now you rotate slowly that cube at that new axis of symmetry, 32 degrees tilted, the chin angle of the Sphinx. It's a pelvic, it's a switch. Now, if you blink 5 times while you're spinning that dodeca, you will have exactly mapped the nodes of that cube becoming a pentadodeca. So it's a stroboscopic effect. It's literally why, if you're living on flatland and somebody tells you there's such a thing as a cube, you would absolutely not believe them. But if a cube passed through a flatland, your piece of paper, 1,000,000 times, and you did a rhythmic traverse, a Sufi dance, and you did what's called digital sampling, then as the cube passed through your flatland piece of paper 1,000,000 times, suddenly you would grok in your head what it was to be a cube, even if your whole life existed on flatland. That's called going to the next dimension. And that's why the higher consciousness time slows down and you don't get dizzy. Yes, or another way of saying that is when you're preparing to die and you see your whole life pass through your eyes, it's like your sampling rate went to infinite because you must do compression in order to enter the array, which is the only place you become immortal as ancestor memory. So if you don't finish that compression process into the longitudinal array, you will not take memory through death. It's very simple physics. So death is absolutely an electrical black hole, and to do it well, you plan electrically for the principles. That's what the Heinrich Clove-Waveform constants are, goldenmean.info/immortality. And here's a Terry, thank you. Joe Champion's book, Isbin Number. That's great. Glad that creating consciousness. And then there's a geometry of all eyes, a beautiful picture here. Thank you, Daniel Fuga. Okay. Awesome, guys. Thank you for this opportunity. How did I do? Tufan, I miss anything?
Yes, thank you so much, everyone, for joining in and asking these questions. And please continue following us. Next week, we will be meeting with Terry. And yeah, thank you for everything.
We had some great fun. Thank you, guys. Thank you for your smiles. Thank you for your questions. So next week, we have Terry Burns on cosmic alchemy and John D. And then we're going to have Patrick, and we have Professor Ralph, who's here tonight. And so, yes, thank you, everybody. Bye, Summer.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you,
See
Hannah.
you. Bye, Dan. Bye, Tufan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan Mac.
Thank you,
Bye,
everybody.
Carrie.
Thank you. Bye.
Cheers.
Blessings,
you.
blessings. It's been fun.
Blessings.
Okay.
Blessings to you all.
Bye, everybody. Toodles. Bye-bye.
Blessings.